I did explain this earlier to all the coaches, but the way it'll play out is...
Welcome again to the championship final of the 21st annual NIBS Worldwide Case Competition. For those of you that weren't here before, we would ask that you please silence cellular phones and other mobile devices right now. And also, as a courtesy to the presenters, please do not leave until after the presentation and the question and answer periods are completed. Please note that the recording of this presentation is strictly prohibited except by the competition organizers or representatives of the participating teams. The second team today is from the University of Prince Edward Island in Canada. The presentation will last a maximum of 20 minutes. I will signal to the presenters when there are 10, 5, 3, and 1. And team members, please nod after seeing the notification to confirm that you have. You must stop when I indicate that the time is up, even if you are not finished. After the presentation, the judging panel will have 10 minutes to ask questions. I will signal to both the presenters and the judges when there are 5, 3, and 1 minute left. Once again, you must stop when time is up. I now invite each member of the judging panel to introduce themselves to the presenters.
I'm Denny Ware.
Mike Novak.
Bruce Floor.
Doug Smith.
Lisa Frio.
Ken Chemical Products is a diversified company that sells products in the fire control, medical, plastics, and consumer goods industries. Despite your company's scope and success, you have experienced problems with global expansion, mainly due to hostile economic environments, as well as the organizational structure of your company. Therefore, your company is looking for a successful way to organize your company so that you can capitalize on these international markets. Our presentation today will outline what we believe is the best strategy for you to address this moving forward. So good afternoon, Mr. Morales and the rest of the board. My name is Harrison, this is Megan, Bobby, and Aaron, and we are Connected Consulting.
So we'll run over an agenda for the day. We'll move into our issue identification, then some key areas of analysis, including the company, your organization, a human resource analysis, and a financial analysis. Then we'll move into the evaluation of alternatives. Finally, our recommendation and implementation plan, including the action plan, the communications plan, the timeline, and a contingency plan. So as Harrison has mentioned, we've identified the key issue as your company is seeking an organizational solution that proves successful in a threatening global economic environment. However, you are facing several complexities. First of all, you have a strategically diverse portfolio. This is a good thing, however, it does require different management skills for each of these items in the portfolio, as well as lack of cooperation by regional and product managers. And again, this stems from your diversified portfolio. You have had difficulties in the past implementing different structures, and this is due to the lack of cooperation and coordination. And finally, previous organizational failures. Right now, you are hesitant to implement any new ideas. As well, because of these past failures, you have experienced lack of motivation among your employees, and this is also a concern. However, we feel our cooperative growth strategy that we will outline for you today will help you achieve this goal, as well as address these complexities.
So our first area of analysis was in regard to your company and the sectors that you are in, and key performance indicators for your company moving forward within these industries. The first being consumer products. And based on our analysis, you need to be managed both locally and regionally when selling these products. Medical plastic, it needs global control. It needs input from all regions over the globe so you can have the best technology to bring to market. And finally, fire control products. They also need global coordination for the research and development, but they also need some input from the regions that you're currently in. So the key takeaway that we took from doing this analysis was that KCI needs to tailor its business model to fit the needs of its product lines individually.
Next, having a look at the organizational structure of your company, we found a few things, particularly with KCI. Their structure is currently laid out very differently than the rest of that at KCP, which we believe is adding to some of the confusion of the coordination. And the GBD roles, they're not clearly defined, so how they're acting is very different for each of them, and it's unclear for those interacting with them what to expect from them. And also with the world boards, that's adding another level of confusion to the decision-making process. And now there's a lot of steps in place when they're trying to just make decisions on where to allocate the capital expenditures. And we believe that by simplifying that, it will make everything a lot easier. So the key takeaway is that KCI needs to clarify lines of communication and simplify the decision-making process.
Next, taking a look at a human resource analysis, we think the key within human resources for your organization is cooperation and coordination. Currently, you're seeing a lack of both. In terms of cooperation, the goals of the different product lines and the different, across different regions and across the same regions are not aligned with KCI as a whole, as we have mentioned. In terms of coordination, there's a lack of coordination between these two areas as well. So for different sectors that provide products for different geographical areas, their goals are not aligned, they have different strategic priorities, and this is causing some confusion and problems for your organization. Which is also resulting in an adjacency problem, which we define as when there is an agent who is acting for the principal, and adjacency is when we want to align and make sure that the agent is acting in the principal, in this case KCI and KC as a whole, for your best interests. So the key takeaway of this analysis is to resolve the current agency problem, KCI must implement new business practices to improve both the coordination and the cooperation of all employees.
So next, taking a look at a financial analysis. Your company did start a lot of growth in the US, however, you are looking to refocus on the international market. So right now, KCI, as the international branch, does compose about 27% of KCP consolidated revenues. And this represents a compound annual growth rate of around 13% for the last several years. Taking a look at each of the products individually, consumer accounts for around 33% of total sales of consumer products for KCP as an entity, fire protection at 45%, and medical plastics at 35%. So the key takeaway here is that to reduce the possible impacts of the impending US recession, KCP and KCI need to further prioritize the KCI division to really focus on these international markets and hopefully mitigate the possible risks of the US recession.
So before we move into the evaluation of the alternatives that we identified for your company, we want to reiterate what we defined as your company's problem. And it is that your company is seeking an organizational structure that will allow it to succeed in a threatening economic environment while battling the complexities of a strategically diverse portfolio, lack of cooperation by regional and product managers, as well as previous organizational failures. So based on our analysis, we identified 3 potential alternatives that your company could implement. The first being to revert to your geographic structure. And this would consist of returning to the original structure that allowed KCI to grow in the first place. The second alternative would be to implement suggested decision matrix by your previous consulting group. And this would allow your company to adopt the suggested decision matrix across all KCI divisions. And finally, implement a tailored structure, which would consist of adapting your current structure to the needs of individual product lines and regions.
So based on our analysis, we come up with 4 different criteria. The first being adaptability, and you can see the key performance indicators for each criteria located along the right. So the first one, adaptability. When analyzing alternatives, we are asking ourselves, will the alternative allow both KPC and KPI to adapt to the needs of the product lines and your geographical region? The second criteria is that it improves cooperation and coordination, as I previously spoke of. So will this alternative reduce the agency problem and improve both cooperation and coordination among employees? Enabling the growth of KCI is also, we feel, is important. So we'll ask ourselves, will this alternative allow KCI to grow to its full potential? And our final criteria being clarifies the decision-making process. We have identified that this is an area of issue. So looking at this alternative, will the alternative simplify this decision-making process that your company currently has? For our evaluation of alternatives, you can see our criteria are located along the top, with the 3 alternatives located along the left-hand side. We've rated these alternatives on a scale of 1 to 3, with 1 being that they are not satisfied, 2 that there is a neutral effect, and 3 that they are fully satisfied. So taking a look at our first alternative of reverting to the geographic structure that you previously had that allowed your company to grow in the first place. In terms of adaptability, we've given this a neutral effect, since if you're not changing anything or reverting back to your old structure, this won't necessarily allow you to adapt to these new market changes. Improving cooperation and coordination and enabling growth, we've given this a 3 because it will improve this cooperation and coordination. This has worked well in the past for your companies. There was defined decision-making processes under this management structure. and clarifies the decision-making. As I mentioned, this worked for you in the past. You were able to have managers based on the geographical locations. Was clearly defined what individuals' roles were and who made the end decisions. Next, looking at the adopted suggested matrix, as your previous consulting group has suggested. This will allow you to adapt quite well to the market based on the fact that it does allow for cooperation and coordination with both your product lines and the different geographical areas that you currently operate in. In terms of improving cooperation and coordination, we think this will take significant time and effort in order to improve the cooperation and the coordination between all these different lines. And finally, the tailored structure of a new strategy will allow you to focus on the product lines rather than the different geographical areas. And in a sense, simplifying the decision matrix that our previously consultant group has suggested. We do think this is quite adaptable if you were to adapt to both the different cultural aspects of the different geographical areas that you operate in and the different needs of your product lines, as we had previously mentioned, whether it be that they be focused regionally or they need more of a global input. It will also improve the cooperation and coordination among your employees if they do have key performance indicators and they're all working towards a common goal of the organization rather than goals of their different roles within the organization. And this will clarify the decision-making process if this matrix was simplified, again ensuring that the right people are at the helm of these decision-making processes and everyone knows where to go and who makes the final decision. So as you can see, this is the decision that we'll be pursuing moving forward, as it has a score of 11.
So with that, we're very excited to introduce to you our proposed cooperative growth strategy, which is consisted of 3 phases. Now, the first phase is the restructuring of your organization. Second phase will be to increase cooperation. And then finally, the third phase is to improve coordination. All right, so looking at restructuring the organization, the goal of this phase is to simplify the decision-making process and resource allocation. And what we hope to do here is adapt KCI organizational structure to the specific needs of the product lines and the regions. And then we're going to clarify and simplify the decision-making and resource allocation. And we'll look to the next slide here and we'll illustrate what we have in mind for the structure itself. Now, first and foremost, we feel that the KCI division needs to be equally as important as the US division, so we've moved it up on the organizational chart level, so you're now reporting directly to the CEO instead of being a division underneath the vice chairman. Next, underneath you is the regional directors of the different areas, and each of them has their own VP of consumer products, since consumer products need to be very locally responsive. Now, the VP of Fire Protection does report directly to the regional directors, but as you can see over on the side here, there's also a head of the Global Fire Control Board who reports not only to the regional directors, but also to the director of Kent US. That way they can both align the global strategy and react relatively quickly to meet different local needs. And finally, the KCI Global Medical Products is a division all on itself that reports both to Kent US and the KCI division and coordinates a unified global strategy. Now, heading up these divisions, since you have very valued employees in their current positions as GBDs, we would like to see them go to their respective positions at the Global Medical Products as well as the Global Fire Control Board. And then with the other gentleman in charge of the consumer products, we think he would be best suited to revert back to his previous sales position.
So the goal of our second phase is to improve cooperation to maximize the likelihood of success of your implementation of this new restructuring that we have previously suggested. So what we're looking to do here to improve this cooperation among different divisions and different employees is we've considered 3 main points that would improve this cooperation, which are control mechanisms, performance incentives, and finally, shared values. In terms of control mechanisms, this would be the structured reported hierarchy that Bobby has just previously discussed. We think it's key that these people know who they're directly reporting to and where the decisions are being made. So that these employees under these new heads of the VP, whether it be the VP of the different domestic areas or at the VP Finance and the Fire Board, they need to be clearly, roles need to be clearly defined, so there is no confusion in terms of who is making the end decision. Performance incentives are another way to improve cooperation among these employees. You have previously mentioned that there has been a lack of cooperation among these employees. You simply just do not want to make the changes that your company as a whole is asking of them. So we think that by implementing new performance incentives, the productivity is linked to these incentives, whether it be incentives that meeting performance target goals of these new organization substructures, and promotion opportunities. So people in these domestic areas feel that they're not opportunities to get promoted within your company, so they are looking at simply achieving their own personal goals rather than the goals of the company, which leads us into our shared values. Your company really needs a clear vision statement across all levels of the organization, not just your US division. So ensuring that everyone is aligned, working towards common goals with a clear vision statement will increase the likelihood of cooperation among all of these employees in the different areas in the globe and your different product sectors that you currently operate in.
So next, looking at improving coordination. So our goal here is to improve coordination and to maximize productivity and to increase the likelihood of the success of this plan. As you previously mentioned that you had difficulties implementing different organizational structures, so we feel that through the combination of these coordination and cooperation initiatives that you will have the maximum likelihood of success for this organizational structure. So again, we've identified 3 areas to improve coordination. The first one being rules and directives. So many successful organizations have clear rules and directives. And we feel that by creating clear job descriptions that you too can have clear rules and directives. With the previous GBD roles, there was some confusion around the roles of what they were actually doing, and the individual themselves were not sure exactly what they were doing. The 3 different individuals in the previous roles did have a different idea, so we feel that by clearly identifying the responsibilities and the duties of these new roles is key to improving coordination. Next, looking at routines. So again, many successful organizations that have a high level of coordination, they implement routines for these coordinated activities. So mandatory meetings. With your previous structure with the GBDs and the world boards, they did have meetings. However, a lot of the times they felt that they weren't productive, they didn't have any successful outcomes, they weren't getting anywhere. So by having mandatory meetings, but also mandatory outcomes, so there will be goals for these meetings and performance indicators that these meetings do have to meet so that the people in these meetings don't feel like they're going nowhere, they don't have a sense of confusion, they have a clear routine for these meetings. And finally, mutual adjustment. So what we're getting at here is that not only will KCI have to adjust and everyone underneath these new roles, but also KCP. So by having both levels of the organization adjust, it does make it easier. They can be more empathetic for the people that are adjusting. It's not just one person, it's everyone in the organization that has to mutually adjust to these new initiatives. So again, we are outlining quite a few changes here, so we feel it's key to really communicate clearly to your employees what will be happening, especially given the fact that in recent years you have implemented quite a few structural changes. So really communicating how this one is different than the previous structural changes and how this one will really improve the coordination and the sense of teamwork within your organization. So first at KCI, we feel it's important that you do communicate to the KCI employees what is really going on. So, there is a small mistake. It's supposed to be KCI that has training for the new roles. So the international division, they will have training for the new roles, as well as aligning the activities with the vision that we've outlined in the previous phase. So aligning these, the new routines and the activities of these employees with the new vision will really help get everyone on board and ensure that this is as successful as it can possibly be. As well as this vision that I've just spoke of, not only communicating to the KCI employees, but also above to the KCP employees to make sure that they are also on board. Previously, there was some confusion where the interests of certain international divisions were not aligned with the US division, so we feel that communication is key here to make sure that everyone is on the same page and ultimately is acting in the best interest of the organization as a whole.
Right, now looking at some financial projections from this strategy, you can see that the top 3 years illustrated are your previous 3 years, and the next are the projections. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that the percentage growth in net sales, we've assumed that it's going to slightly increase in the first year by 1.5%, And then in the subsequent years, it'll be an additional 5%. And that delay is due to the fact that there will be some costs implicated with this strategy, and it will be slightly delayed by the time it gets in place and you'll be able to reap the benefits of it. And then the other thing is the percentage of net income or your profit margin we project to grow, because each year that you've put in place either the GBDs or the world boards, we saw a slight drop because of the lack of communication and coordination. So we believe this will also increase through the increased productivity. And at the end of the third year, the international division alone, we project to increase up to $55.7 million contributed to KCP. And the timeline, as you can see, everything is implemented within the first year. It'll be delayed, start implementing the new structure change after 6 months' time, but the rest of the initiatives will be implemented within the first year.
As is the case with any strategy, there are some inherent risks involved. The risks that we identified were the fact that the company could not adapt to the new structure that we outlined today, or that the cooperation and coordination does not improve. However, due to time constraints today, we will not be able to go over the mitigation and contingency, but if you do have any questions, we will be able to address them in the question period. Your company came to us looking for a successful way to organize your company to deal with the threatened global economic environment. We believe with our cooperative growth strategy that involves restructuring your organization, increasing cooperation, and improving coordination, you will ultimately see the outcomes of improved profitability, employee motivation, and maximize your productivity. So at this time, I'd like to thank you for listening to our presentation today and open up the floor to any questions that you may have.
That presentation was 19 minutes and 59 seconds.
Oh, 1 second.
Excellent
Four
planning.
seconds longer than the other.
I got a little bit confused. I wonder if you could clarify for me the organizational changes and summarize them with respect to both the domestic and the international business, and how is that getting integrated?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, we wanted to put the international division on par with the U.S. And the product lines, both the medical products and the fire prevention products, both need a global focus. So we want them to interact with both the U.S. department and the international division. And then underneath the international division, we will set it up regionally from there and have local branches of both consumer products and fire protection products.
In these boxes, who controls what functions?
As the regional directors, that will be the existing regional directors that are in place. And underneath, like the head of the global medical products will be the gentleman who was the global business director for medical products, and as with the global fire control board. And underneath those are those about, sorry, it goes.
Okay, but what is the relationship between the selling and marketing organizations and the product organizations?
So the product organizations, the ones working locally especially, will be both involved in the marketing and market research, identifying what the customers need and looking into the distribution channels that are best suited to those markets. And that's why we have them set up in the regional areas, because they require different distribution as well as different market needs.
Let's take the example of one of the divisions, and we'll just say global medical, wants a lot more money for R&D. How does that process percolate up through the organization?
Okay, so with the global medical, for example, since they are reporting to both, or working with, sorry, both the U.S. division and the international division, there would be a meeting of both heads of the departments, the head of the medical products departments, as well as the entire board of directors and CEO of the entire KCP organization.
How different is that from what we're doing right now?
Well, right now, within the international division, if there's resources proposed to be allocated on the regional level, it first has to be agreed upon by the general business directors and the regional director, then go to the world board, and then it moves up to the KCI board of directors, and then up to the vice chairman and the corporate level on top. So there's a lot of extra levels, and should be eliminating those by at least half.
I wasn't quite clear, but, you know, the GCBs, are you planning to keep those, or are they eliminated? Because then you talk about training and clarity of roles, and, you know, my recollection is, you know, that's the area where there is a lack of clarity, but it doesn't seem to be, there's not a big indication that that's a company-wide problem, so.
Yes, and the clarity of roles is largely on the GBDs. And what we propose to do with them is, first off, one of them, the one that was in charge of the consumer products, he had spent years before that as the head of the sales department. So we think he's best suited there. He didn't see great success within this new role. And the other, the Global Fire Control Board and the Global Medical Board, would be headed up by the GBDs that were in place with those.
Are you sure they're not part of the problem and not part of, and should they still be part of the solution?
We saw, based on all the evidence, that they were actually performing well in their roles and garnering a little bit of traction and success. So in these new roles, they would have more clearly defined objectives that both they understand what needs to be done, as well as the people that are working underneath them and for them.
Okay.
Two questions. One is, you're planning a lot of changes, training, stuff like that. Where are you going to get the money? And number two is, a company is doing a lot of business with joint ventures, and they're not going to listen to Kent as well. They have different master. How are you going to coordinate that aspect of the business?
So we feel that you have made some changes recently to acquire controlling interest in these joint ventures.